The as I was writing it, there was two or three major metaphors that kind of worked its way through: lobsters, penguins, and stories. So I had heard a long time ago when I was going through the medical evaluation board transition, where there's the, hey, you may not be able to stay in the Army. Back when I had all the surgeries and things, and I heard it, forgot it, and then heard it again a few years ago. That when you're going through a transition, you're like a lobster. People who understand lobsters, or as my other buddy Dave in Rhode Island calls them, bugs. They're for them to grow, that exoskeleton on them, it has to shed. When they grow, that skeleton has to go away, and it's very, very painful. I would imagine. If they had emotions, I would say very scary. And they're also very vulnerable during that time period, which means that anything else in the ocean that thinks that they're delicious will eat them too. However, they need to take cover, and they require some kind of protection. But just like that, whenever we're going through a transition, whenever we are changing from what we were to what we should be, to what we want to be, to what we need to be, we have to be able and willing to get rid of what we were. Get rid of that baggage that we don't need, that isn't holding us anymore. What isn't helping you is holding you back. And just like that lobster, we have to get rid of that. It's painful, it's dangerous, but it's absolutely necessary. So I really, really associated with that we're all kind of lobsters in this.
Hey everyone, welcome to the podcast. Nice to have everyone back with us. Today I've got a great guest on with me today. We're going to talk about a lot of great stuff. And I'm looking forward to this. It's really great. Christopher's here with me, Christopher Wiley, Ph.D. Let's keep that in mind. And also a superhero by night. And we're not going to give away all of the secrets. Christopher, welcome to the podcast. Nice to have you here.
It's a fantastic time to be here. So as I was sending you an email this morning, I almost felt like Hal from that space movie, 2001: Space Odyssey. Mm-hmm. There was a brain hiccup right there. Yeah.
See?
Good morning, Dave.
Good morning. Nice to start the day with you. Thank you for making time for all of us listening, and for me. I really appreciate it. Tell us a little bit first, right off the bat. I'd like to share with everybody where you're joining me from today. Would be nice.
I am joining you from just outside of look out the back window, just outside of sunny Augusta, Georgia, where we're about to begin the annual tradition of the U.S. Masters tournament for golf. We have Augusta National right down the road. Never been on it. I've driven past it a bunch of times. I have no intention on going. I'm going to actually avoid that road as much as possible this week. But it's fantastic for the city. It's one of the big things that we're known for. And the other big thing that Augusta is known for is being the hometown of the hardest working man in show business, James Brown.
I thought you were going to say you, first of all.
Okay.
I'm like, what? Really? Yeah. Oh, James Brown.
I'm a big fan of James Brown, and that's something he and I have in common, because no one was a bigger fan of James Brown than James Brown. Yeah.
Well, my claim to fame is I'm really good at mini putt. I can do a little of that. That's what I like. And that's the one thing about golf that I don't enjoy is the putting part. It's getting to the tee is not as bad as the putting. That's where you look like you have no idea what you're doing. So I love like a windmill and a little water thing and a little, a boot that you have to shoot the ball through the boot. That's what I like.
The last little daycation that the family and I took, we went to a place in Georgia called Helen. It's a little German town up in the hills, and it's absolutely beautiful. And there's like 4 or 5 mini golf courses there. We went there, and we actually went across town, just walked the entire thing. One is up on a hill that if you drive up, you won't be able to actually see the front of your car because it's about a 35 degree angle, and we walked up that in the pouring rain and waited for the rain to stop to play golf. And 2 times out of all of those, I got high score. which I realized
Wait a
is the
minute.
exact. Yeah, let's say, oh no. Turns out my bowling and golf scores are about the same.
Okay. There you go. Well. Okay. Well, yeah, one is good and one's probably not quite as good. Okay, now we've bonded on that. That's wonderful. You're on the podcast to talk about your book and all the great stuff going on with you. We talked a little bit before, as a kind of a chat ahead of time, and you gave me a little insight to your story as well. And I found that really interesting. Your service to your country, and some of the amazing things you got to do. And you described flying helicopters in a way that I had never heard anybody describe these machines and how amazing they are, but how they are all maintained and the amazing people behind the scenes that kept you in the air. Can you talk a little bit about your military service? I'd love to kind of share that with people listening as well.
Absolutely. So the analogy that I gave to describe the helicopters, I'm going to get to. But I've always believed incredibly accurate. I started my military career right out of high school as a long-haired hippie, looking freak, according to my best friend when I went to college, who was he just recently retired as well from the military. But he had been already in the National Guard when we started college. I went to college wanting to be a radio DJ. I wanted to be a combination of Paul Harvey and Howard Stern.
Okay.
But the summer before I went to college, my grandfather had passed away, and he was a World War II veteran. He joined the Army before World War II. His unit went forward to North Africa. He stayed behind, was selected to be a drill instructor, basically. And then he went forward, and he came back as an officer. So he got a field commission for doing something awesome over there. I don't know what. And neither does anybody else, because in the mid-'70s, there was a fire in the archives in St. Louis, and his files were among those that were destroyed, which is tragic for history for a lot of families. So I can only guess and put some things together. But he had recently passed away, and I had gotten a letter from the ROTC, Reserve Officer Training Corps, from my college, and said, hey, you want to take this free class? Try rappelling, do paintball, wear free boots. And I'm like, free boots sound like fun. So I signed up for that. And during that process, I realized I could actually lead soldiers for a living when I got out of college and start my career right where Grandpa Wiley left off. And about 32 seconds after that thought, it occurred to me, you're going to lead soldiers, you need to go become one first. So I walked my butt down to the recruiter and talked to, at the time, Sergeant Charles States, and told him what I needed to do. I wanted to do this, I'm going to do this, and applied for an ROTC scholarship all at the same time. Because if you got the scholarship, you could become an officer without having to go to basic training, without having to do several other things. And I went throughout the rest of the year making that, working that process. And the week before I left for basic training, I got a call from our ROTC office going, hey, congratulations, you got your scholarship. I'm going to call up your reserve unit and start the paperwork so you don't have to leave for basic. And I thought for a second and I asked, well, ma'am, if I left and came back, and if I didn't get this call, would I still have the scholarship? She said, well, yeah, but then I interrupted her. I said, then call me in September. I was not going to go lead soldiers and become an officer until I became one. So I left for basic training, lived that life for a little bit, finished college, and became a helicopter pilot. That's the story of how we got into it.
Yeah. But
what I learned quickly when after flying helicopters in flight school and then moving to first unit was out of Fort Campbell, and I got to the unit. The unit had already deployed. I was at Fort Campbell for about a month, and I moved forward to Qayyarah West, Iraq. And there I got most of my in-unit flight training, and I learned to appreciate the true heroes of Army aviation, and really any aviation unit. Because I there with a college degree and experience was flying a multi-million-dollar aircraft of a million moving parts connected to a giant bag of flaming fluid that is built by the lowest bidder and maintained by a kid with a high school education, if that.
Right.
And the fact is, that is not meant to be pejorative. That means that you don't need to have that college degree to do something great. The reason why the Army has crew chiefs is because even pilots need heroes.
Wow.
Because they are the ones that kept us alive. They're the ones that kept us in the air so that we could then watch over the shoulders and watch over the backs of the troopers on the ground. So if it weren't for those crew chiefs that keeping the birds in the air, then we wouldn't have been able to do our job. So I give nothing but props to them every single time.
It's got to be amazing to go through the training from not being a pilot of a helicopter to being in the air and just having them teach you and instruct you and give you all the tools to do what you've done. That's a lot to learn.
Have you ever juggled?
No, I play drums though.
Okay, so
yeah.
I've never been good on a trap set. But I've tried juggling a few times, and I've got maybe like the three-hand shuffle for like about 3 cycles, and then it's done.
That's done.
But learning how to fly a helicopter is a lot like learning how to juggle. It's really that simple, except instead of juggling soft balls, you're juggling midgets that are each of them juggling chainsaws.
Okay, yeah, that's dangerous.
Yeah, it can be, but there's absolutely nothing like breaking gravity, breaking contact with the ground under something that you're controlling. And the only thing that feels better than that is landing safely and walking away from the thing. And unfortunately, I just read some news this morning that at that very place that I went back, not in Iraq, but Fort Campbell, Kentucky, we just had I believe it was a mid-air collision between 2 UH-60s. So there's a lot of families right now that I don't even know the names of the families yet that are getting some bad news and whose lives were absolutely torn apart. My heart goes out to them as I'm thinking about that. So I don't want to make it seem like me making light of all of this would be making light of that. That is the dark reality that we live in. Ooh,
yeah.
Just went down.
Yeah. So how long did you serve overseas then?
So the first time I got there a little bit late, so it was about 9 months.
Okay.
Second time I was there for a full trip, which was a year for me. And the third time I got medevaced out 2 months into it with an infection that had gotten into my heart, went up to my brain, into some of my internal organs. Some of it went down my leg, made a blockage, and apparently, as many doctors have tried to remind me, I was very, very, very close to dying. Spoiler alert, I didn't.
That would make for an interesting interview had that happened.
Sure would.
Yes. Wow. That's amazing. So was that the end of your flight career then as well?
That was the end of my flight career. But thing is, I wasn't done with the Army yet. And I wasn't all that thrilled about them telling me that they were done with me. And because I had an absolutely amazing angel pulling me through all of that medical time. She's called my wife, Samantha. She kept me encouraged during that time and fought to, instead of being accepting reality as it could have been, fighting for the reality that I wanted. I wasn't done serving yet. I wanted to be able to tell the Army when I was done, not have them tell me. So I happened to have made a decision previously to leave aviation, not because I didn't enjoy it, but because I make it sound like I was an awesome pilot. I really wasn't. I was an okay pilot. I was a safe pilot. I enjoyed it, and I was getting better. But there's some things that you need a particular amount of time to get really good at. And it just so happens I wasn't getting it. A lot of people weren't, but I needed more time than the average to get good, and I was just kind of going downhill. So instead of getting really, really mediocre and possibly being dangerous in the air, I decided to leave aviation and become what we called an information operations officer, which is working with influence and non-kinetic effects, making what we want to have happen without using bombs, bullets, or boots. Turns out that decision helped the medical evaluation board decide to keep me in after all of my surgeries and things. So I then started a second half of a career, not flying, but working in various capacities at different organizations, doing that kind of stuff.
So for anyone that's listening, they're getting to the end of their high school days, thinking of what's next. Young men, young women thinking of serving. What would you say to them?
I would never steer anybody towards service, but I will appreciate everyone that wants to do it and is willing to step in the breach for their families. It's important to know, and I think that we've come as a society a lot closer to this realization. That people who are in service, people who are in the military, they're not doing it because they like being in the Army, like getting up in the morning, like wearing a uniform, or like finding, closing with, and destroying the enemy. They do it because they want to experience some things. They do it because what's behind them is more important. They love what's behind them, their family, their country, more than they dislike what's in front of them, which is often the adversary. So it's not an easy life, and the world is changing. The Army is different than the one that I joined. The adversary is different. The political climate is different. Everything is different. So I would never tell anybody what they should or shouldn't do. I can just give them guidance on, here's what might happen if you do this. Here's what might happen if you don't.
So what's different about you from the time you walked in to enlist to today?
Everything. Otherwise, I would have wasted the last 25 years.
Yeah.
Well, not everything, I guess, because the core of who I am, the things I believe in, are probably only strengthened. I'm a bit older. I'd like to think a bit wiser, but maybe I'm just more of a wise guy. I don't know. I've been given the opportunity for additional perspective. I heard once that the only difference between you today and you 5 years ago is the people you've met and the books you've read. And I've read a couple good books. I read terribly slow, but I've met some amazing people.
Yeah.
And when you meet amazing people, you can't, like yourself, by the way, I'm so privileged to get to spend this time with you.
Yes, thank you.
You can't help but be changed by it. And yeah, so I have a wider perspective.
Good. And I think, that would definitely, serving the way you have and the people you've met and the training that's been given to you and what's been demonstrated to you has to change you. I can't imagine you not be different from that to this, right?
There's a lot of things and circumstances that you get into that people say, well, they talked about football or other sports. They don't build character, they reveal it. Well, I think it's a little bit of both. There's the John Maxwell, author and leadership guru, talks in a book, talks about defining moments in his book, Leadership Gold, and several other books. And defining moments both reveal and build. They reveal and build what's in you. Not only do they show this is the kind of thing that you're made of, but then it acts as a tempering agent that not only does it show it, but it makes it stronger. When you test that thing that's already in you, it becomes more you. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, and becomes who you are. Yeah, I love that. Yeah. Excellent. Okay, so tell me a little bit about your author journey. I would love to kind of know how all this started for you and what took you down the path to say, I want to start reaching out in this way.
So I've wanted to write a book for a while, probably, I want to say around before I started my master's degree. I'd always thought about wanting to share a book. I've been a martial arts instructor for a long time, wanted to write a martial arts instruction book, and never was able to bring myself to get too much of it together because I had this entire perception in my mind. Other people have those. Somebody else is already doing that. Nobody's going to want to read mine. Which is a very common experience that many authors have about everything. And I'm going to jump to the chase and I'll come back to it. Get that out of your head. Write it anyway.
Yeah.
But I would draft something up and maybe it would be 60, 70 pages, and I'd give it to a few people to help them on their journey, but it never really published. And that kind of went to the sideline as I was working through the Army. And then started my Ph.D. journey after really enjoying my master's program in organizational leadership. Like, I want to get more into this. And it occurred to me about halfway through that, you know what? What are you going to do with this? If you're not going to be teaching, you probably need to do something with your, as a PhD, part of the process is adding to the body of knowledge. And you do that through your dissertation. But nobody reads your dissertation except you and a few folks, unless you're really, really lucky, or some unlucky PhD student ends up looking at it for some kind of guidance. But when you do that, that's it. I wanted to be able to add a little bit more, but I wasn't sure how to do that. Now, cut scene, move back. I'm in a motorcycle club. Been in one since 2011. And in that capacity, I have the opportunity to spend a lot of time with some amazing young men. And usually they're female compatriots and love interests or wives or whatever. And get to talk with them, get to know them, and occasionally provide them mentoring. And there was a young man that I was mentoring a couple of years ago that between him and my son, I came up with 10 rules to give general guidance to people. I go, hey, when life hits you, here's 10 rules that you can use this rule or that rule, and it became a mentoring tool. And I gave them to him, and he was doing really well with them. And I decided, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and expand those and teach, since I knew that I was leaving the area that he was in, because I moved or was going to move. I'm like, I'm going to flesh this out a bit, going to stretch it out so that there's more information in case he has questions. And in the process of writing that, he left my motorcycle club. He went to other interests and other organizations, as people often do. But he's never, unless he bought my book now, he hasn't had the opportunity to get that information. And if he's listening to this, understand, and I'm not even going to say his name, but if he's listening, he knows, you helped me inspire the book, and all that's in there. And it turned into a chapter of it. I'm like, you know what? There's more I can do. So I didn't have enough information to write about any individual thing, I didn't think. So those became chapters. I wanted to talk about this. I wanted to talk about my family. I wanted to talk about problem solving. I wanted to talk about gaining perspective. And each time I would sit down and write an essay or something, it would become that. And like, there's a chapter. Yes. And I plugged it into that document. And eventually it became the book, The Lobster's Guide to Herding Penguins, a practical guide for gaining perspective and living the stories worth telling. It's a really long title, and I usually use the short form, just The Lobster's Guide to Herding Penguins.
Can you tell me how you settled on that name, please? I love this.
Sorry about that. As I was writing it, there was two or three major metaphors that kind of worked its way through. Lobsters, penguins, and stories. So I'd heard a long time ago when I was going through the medical evaluation board transition, where there's hey, you may not be able to stay in the Army. back when I had all the surgeries and things. And I heard it, forgot it, and then heard it again a few years ago, that when you're going through a transition, you're like a lobster. People who understand lobsters, or as my other buddy Dave in Rhode Island calls them bugs. They're for them to grow, that exoskeleton on them, it has to shed. When they grow, that skeleton has to go away, and it's very, very painful. I would imagine if they had emotions, I would say very scary. And they're also very vulnerable during that time period, which means that anything else in the ocean that thinks that they're delicious will eat them too. However, they need to take cover, and they require some kind of protection. But just like that, whenever we're going through a transition, whenever we are changing from what we were to what we should be, to what we want to be, to what we need to be, we have to be able and willing to get rid of what we were. Get rid of that baggage that we don't need, that isn't holding us anymore. What isn't helping you is holding you back.
Right.
And just like that lobster, we have to get rid of that. It's painful, it's dangerous, but it's absolutely necessary. So I really, really associated with that we're all kind of lobsters in this. And then we have penguins. I learned this particular metaphor from one of my old military bosses. He was talking about, don't bring me don't tell me something just randomly. You got to prepare me, because you're going to knock a penguin off my iceberg. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And he explains, so your brain is like an iceberg, not in that Jungian sense that it's really, really deep, although it's a different thing, but it's only so big. And if you got a penguin that hops on there, it's got plenty of room. And when you're a kid, you've got plenty of room for new information, for new everything. Right. But eventually that iceberg gets pretty packed with penguins. So eventually one hops on and it knocks another one off. And you don't know what one just got knocked off.
Right.
Fortunately, it's still swimming around the outside of the iceberg. And when it hops on, another one will get knocked off. He uses the example of, hey, when you bring me random things that I'm not expecting, I forget something that I never even knew that I forgot. You told me that, I just forgot my high school English teacher's first name. It's a random thing. I don't know.
Right.
Hey, sir, we got this thing going on. This guy showed up. Great. I just forgot my mom's phone number. Yeah. And it's that kind of thing. But what I've come to learn as well is, through a deliberate process of basically triaging information that comes in, by having a good understanding of critical thinking, of logical fallacy, of just paying attention, you can actually herd your penguins. You can put them in little boxes. You can control what ones are hopping on, which ones are hopping off. And by being able to put them and categorize them, take more deliberate effort to understand how your brain works, you can actually fit more penguins in there. And if you're really good, you can even teach them to dance, because they're already in the tuxedos. They're so cute. And then, but that isn't where the penguins stop. But I'm going to move on just a little bit. And by doing all of that, you can rewrite your story, because your story is nothing more than your experience and what your experience is going to be. We think in stories, we talk in stories, we understand in stories. So in order to take those penguins that we understand and be able to make them do what we want them to do, we can rewrite our story. Now, after my book came out, a friend of mine, Jeff, over in Washington, he posted something on his Facebook about, hey, I'm reading this, and here's a thing that I've just realized. And he took my penguin model to a completely different level. And instead of just information coming in and out, he talked about it as a model for your priorities, for your psychological and emotional things, and going, you know what? I only got so much room for each of these penguins. And the penguins I'm focusing on are my family. I'm focusing on that. And that hit different. And I'm like, wow, there is more to this. And I have since come to use the penguins as a model for all of our relationships. And I believe firmly 100% that everything in life is a relationship. anywhere that there's any two things, there's a relationship between them, whether it's people, places, or things. I have a relationship to my water bottle, which is right over here. It's a distance relationship, but what it represents, it has things in it that I want. And between those two things, there's influence. There's a bidirectional flow of influence, and whichever one is stronger is actually leading the other. Now, so between me and a person that I'm leading, I have the stronger influence, therefore I'm leading. If I'm in charge, but I'm actually more influenced by the guy who's working for me, then he's the one leading me, whether I'm in charge or not. Now, as a leadership coach, that's an important thing to point out. But there's more deeper implications about that. For example, some people may have a problem with caffeine. And like, I need my caffeine in the morning. If that caffeine is influencing you more than you're enjoying the caffeine, as in you need that. I'm saying caffeine, but it's a veiled allegory for alcohol or any other kind of addiction.
Right.
When your decisions are made by according to what that thing or your need to get that thing, you are being led by that can of beer. You're being led by that cup of coffee, by that extra plate of tacos, by that whatever. So when you're being led by something that you realize you shouldn't be led by, that's one of those gut punches that then leads you to realize I might need help. But it's all relationships.
Nice. That makes total sense. I love it. I love how you've kind of taken this down the path together and kind of unpack that for us. That's great. Like, and you talk about the power of a story. I think when we talked earlier, we talked about even just math. Math problems require stories so that we can understand the math that we're learning. And I know growing up, those are always the questions. Those are always the hard ones, those problems, and they put them in word format, and you'd have a story and it would lead you to a math problem. And you're like, oh, I don't know. The train left the station at this time and went this way. And you're like, what? So stories are powerful.
The local store has 5 boxes of chocolate bars of 25 bars each. Johnny buys 30 of those boxes. What does Johnny have? Diabetes. Johnny has diabetes now.
Yeah, and dental records. Yes. Just like that. So, so the power of a story is amazing. So any advice from your perspective on crafting our story if we feel like we don't have something that's interesting to say?
Say it anyway, because we all have a unique experience in this life. We all have a unique perspective on it. I have not been where you've been. I haven't been where the homeless guy down near the bridge on Green Street in Augusta has been. And you know what? He's got an amazing story. I just need to hear it. People need to hear your story, no matter who you are, no matter how dull you think your story is. You've got an amazing story, because everybody experiences life differently. And I wish more people would realize that and actually understand that your life is an amazing story. And you're happening to life instead of life happening to you.
Love it. So at no point was any lobsters or penguins harmed in the writing of this book.
That is a fact. And as is stated on the cover, and I even adopted.
Come on, look at you go. I love it. I love it.
He's actually right next to my screen, and I have another one on my bookshelf. And as I go to various places, I'm probably going to pick up one here or there as representative, and I'm just going to keep on. And my wife's bringing me the other singular lobster that I have in my office.
There you go. I love it. Is there more stuff coming for you writing wise in the future? What do you think?
There is, because as much as I loved the book and the process of writing that first book, author and talker speaker Simon Sinek has mentioned, hey, when you're writing a book, a lot of people aren't happy with their first one. You know what? It's like a pancake. When you start making pancakes, the first one usually doesn't turn out very well. Doesn't turn out the way you want it. It's still delicious. It's still got good stuff in it. It has the exact same stuff in it that your third and fourth one does. It just turns out better. So you have to keep making pancakes to get to the good pancake. The book, as it came out, I enjoyed writing it. There's a lot in it that I'm proud of. There's some editing and some publishing things that as I look at it, it's just a glaring error that some people may not notice, but I can't stand it.
Right.
So I decided to kind of rewrite it. And in rewriting it and the thought process through that, some things came out like the relational penguins instead, and 5 categories of those relationships, and so many other things. So I'm going to be taking a lot of what's in that and several other places things that I've absorbed in this process and expanding it out. There'll be another one coming. I can't tell you exactly when. My goal was to have it out by the end of the year, but I don't know if that's going to happen. So I don't want to promise that just yet. But it's going to be a more comprehensive, almost a teaching system for personal growth, for coaching, for leadership thinking, all of these things. It'll include a 90-day plan for, hey, how do you apply this and then get back into it? There's going to be interactive, going to be some QR codes in there that you can then hop in and look at, go to a YouTube and then, hey, let me talk to you a bit about what you just read. Nice. And then share a story. I'm going to have some things like that. Nice. But that's in there. I'm a featured author in a book being put together by a man named Brian Brogan called Voices for Leadership. And the only reason it's not published yet is because we're still looking for a few more authors. The chairs we're running out. So if you or anybody else that's listening is interested in contributing to that as a leader and telling their story, because everybody should be telling their story, then can get in touch with Brian Brogan through Googling Voices for Leadership book, and that'll take you to a website to get some more information. I think that's a fantastic opportunity. I'm in that, and I'm just starting to get on some podcasts like this one. You're probably I was on one yesterday. It was the 1 minute podcast.
A 1 minute podcast? I've never heard of a 1 minute podcast. Wow.
I had his name, and if I hadn't tried to tell you right now, I would have remembered it.
A penguin just fell off the iceberg right there.
A penguin just fell off the iceberg.
Right there, exactly it just happened. It just happened.
See, you just watched it in real time. Tanmay Senap. Tanmay Senap. I connected with him through the same place that I connected through here, I think. But he does a 1 minute podcast. You go on, you talk about questions, and he goes, hey, I'm doing this. Here's me, and here's the question. Go ahead and answer it. Boom, and you got 1 minute to go. Wow! So it's a talking point. It's very, very focused. He's doing one every day until he gets 1,000 of them on his Instagram. So that'll be published in about 3 days now, along with a whole bunch of others, I'm sure. So that's another opportunity. And then there's several other podcasts that that I'm going to be having the privilege of being on here with.
Excellent. Any advice before we go for new authors? What would you like to say from your perspective? How do we encourage somebody to share their story?
Just start writing. And there's nothing more scary than a blank page or a blank screen. And when you have something you want to say, but you don't know how to put it into words, literally just start writing. Sitting down going, I don't know what to write, period. This is never going to happen. Why am I even bothering to talk about penguins? Penguins are so small and they have and then suddenly what happens is just by getting something out of there, you have a blockage. And all you got to do is blow it out, and then the words will come. So if you want to write and you got writer's block, just start writing anything. And what you actually need to get to will come through. And do it. The hardest thing to do is to do it. You got to make that first pancake.
You don't have to be great to start, but you have to start to be great.
Could not have said it better myself.
How's that? Beautiful. So I'm on your LinkedIn as we're chatting, and we'll put links to your LinkedIn. Where else can we go to connect with you and continue the conversation?
I'm regular on TikTok right now. I'm just starting that up. It's at AC Wiley WLS. Stands for Wiley Leadership Solutions, but it's AC Wiley WLS. That's the same on Instagram and on Facebook. And I've got things going on all three of those, putting out a minute and a half a day of just stuff that I'm picking up, things I might be working through that particular day. I had one of my videos saying, hey, you've seen me talking about this stuff, and you're going, I've seen you not do that. You're absolutely right. I'm working through it too, and thank you for holding me accountable.
Nice.
So it's a way of me growing as well, and I'm really hoping I'm helping other people with it.
And there's a chance we're going to see penguins and lobsters in some of your social media as well? Of course. Yes. Okay, there's a nodding penguin. I love it. Now every time I see an iceberg and a penguin, I'm going to think of you. It's great.
Fantastic.
I love it. I love it. And I love the name of your book, and I love what you're doing. And again, thank you so much for your service to your country and to everyone that serves. And we really do admire and honor and the sacrifices and being away from home and all the things you've done. Thank you for doing that. And thank you for writing your book and sharing your time with us today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Great. Everyone, please go check all the links in the show notes. And would love for people to go and pick up this book. And if you love lobster, if you love penguins, and you love a great book, this book's for you. So thank you for being part of the show.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks for being part of the podcast again. Appreciate you investing time in the show and you for listening this far. Thank you. One thing to keep in mind is we are looking for help and some support for the podcast. If you are able to help support our show, our little podcast show here, we can go over to livingthenextchapter.com and all the instructions will be there to help support the show. It takes about $30 to $40 a month to do this, just for the hosting and all of that other stuff that we pay for. But if the show is giving you any value and you're enjoying what's happening here, would love any kind of support that you can offer. That would be great. And you being here and sharing the show helps us grow. Helps us get great new authors on the show, connect with other listeners, and build community. So whatever you can do to share this show today, I really appreciate it. Thank you for being here for Living the Next Chapter, and I can't wait to share the next one with you. Talk soon. Have a great day.
Mindshift Power Podcast, the podcast for teenagers and those who work with them. There's a huge problem in America today. There's a very large disconnect between teenagers and the adults who work with them. I'm looking to bridge that gap with real, raw, honest conversation, not held back by the chains of political correctness. You cannot solve a problem you do not understand. Want to understand teenagers today? Listen to this podcast. This podcast is for teens in the U.S. and Canada. To learn more, go to fatimabay.com/podcast or just look for Mindshift Power Podcast on any listening platform. I look forward to you being a faithful listener.